John Heilemann, pretty extraordinary to see a Democratic senator take to the floor, clearly alarmed. I know on the House side they've been alarmed for longer because I think the bipartisan spirit of their investigations broke down well before it did, if it has on the Senate side. But can you just talk about this moment of the specter of seeing a Democrat take to the floor, truly alarmed that the president might fire and put in motion a crisis like that?
Well, on some level, not surprising. I mean, the thing I just want to focus on is quite a narrow thing, but a very important thing. In the previous incarnation or instantiation where we had this moment where, as you pointed out, the House bipartisan nature of the House investigation broke down, what we saw, you will remember, was Richard Burr and Mark Warner standing up side by side in a bipartisan show of we are the adults on the Senate, the bipartisan adults in the room. Don't worry about the House of Representatives. We are standing as one. We will get to the bottom of what's going on. Now we have seen again the House process has completely fallen apart, and as Congressman Swalwell suggested, it's clear that there is no red line around firing Mueller, and in fact there are many people, Republicans on the House committee, who would happily get Donald Trump if he fired Bob Mueller. So now we have Mark Warner out alone on the Senate floor. What message does that send about where Richard Burr is? Why are the two of them not standing side by side? I don't know the answer to that question. We may hear from Richard Burr within hours or within a day that he's right with Mark Warner. But if he is not, and if the Senate committee is now headed in the direction of where the House committee is, we are entering a very dangerous period, because if this becomes partisan, it will, and Donald Trump is given the encouragement of not just Republicans in the House, who he's kind of orchestrating, but Republicans in the Senate, that he can go ahead and fire any of the people you mentioned, that he can fire Rod Rosenstein, that he can get to firing Bob Mueller. If he seems like he has a permission slip from Republicans on both sides of Capitol Hill, the likelihood he will do it, which is already, I think, high, will become much, much higher if he thinks that he has that kind of backing from other members of the party.
And it's our understanding, NBC News' understanding, that Richard Burr was not at the White House today. Obviously, if you're watching, Senator, give us a call. We'd love to know where you come down on this. But what's your theory on sort of the disintegration of the bipartisan spirit of what at least seemed to have started as a bipartisan spirit of the two Intel committees' investigations into potential collusion between the Trump orbit and Russia?
I mean, I think it is the overwhelming narrative, which has been sort of a subtext for the entire year. Everyone's aware of it, but it sort of hasn't emerged very much, which is just the stark partisanship that exists in America today. Everyone knows it, but I don't think people really get it.
It started with Devin Nunes, who was basically a stooge of the some Trump NSC staffer who I think has since been fired in the Kelly regime. And I remember Sean Spicer calling me and said, "Ooh, you're going to hear a lot of this word unmasking," and I was like, "Ooh, I worked there 6 years, never heard that before." But you know, they tried to assassinate the character of Susan Rice. They've gone after Jim Comey. Jim Comey, who Democrats have more reason to hate and distrust than Republicans. I mean, Uranium One was going to be the big thing. Then you found out. I mean, if you tick through all of the fake scandals that the partisan Republicans on the Intel committees have tried to sort of throw up to I don't know what, to distract from. But here's my question. Why don't they want to get to the bottom of Russian collusion? Why don't they care about that?
It's a totally fair question. I don't have an answer to it. I mean, I think that what I would point out, though, is that this overlay of partisanship, and I just want to point out that there was a poll that was done yesterday where Pew was actually asking people which was the most significant gulf in America, and asked, is it race? Is it between black people and white people? And more people said it was between Democrats and Republicans, who had a very strong gulf there than between black and white people, which has been obviously a key issue this year. I just want to point that out because the Nunes thing itself stems from Donald Trump's weird tweet about Trump Tower being wiretapped, right? I mean, so this is people who recognize that there is a core base within the Republican Party who is stepping up and wants to stand with Donald Trump, who is staying allied with Donald Trump despite everything he's done over the course of the past year. And there is value from voters, and there's value from conservative media in standing with Donald Trump no matter what the odds, because partisan tension is so high, because Republicans are on Team Republican and Democrats are on Team Democrat so forcefully that standing with Trump, despite all of his flaws, all of the flaws that we've talked about today and talked about every day, you know, since January 20th, despite that, partisanship carries the day.
And Donald Trump is the Republican president that they've got. If they want to do anything, he's the Republican president that they got. So they see this investigation as far as it's reaching into the Trump administration in part, and I'm not speaking for everybody, but in part as obstruction, as an impediment to getting that across. And so muddying the waters, talking about Hillary Clinton, all these things are ways to sort of take to build more distrust into this investigation. And I think that's one part of it. I think the other part of it is that the more distrust that you build among the American people, the more ability that you knock on Bob Mueller, the easier it is to have a situation where one of three things happen. Either Donald Trump feels emboldened enough to fire Bob Mueller, or Donald Trump when something goes down and there are more indictments, he issues pardons because he says that this whole investigation was so unfair, or he fires Attorney General Jeff Sessions, puts somebody else in and says, okay, well, this new Attorney General isn't recused, so thank you, Mr. Mueller, for your service. We don't need you anymore. Either way, it makes these things go away, and I think that's why Democrats are starting to really raise the red flag a lot more loudly right now, because they see all of these things happen, and they don't see either of those three outcomes as good for not just this investigation, but for democracy.
Let me put this to you one more time. Are Republicans dead inside? What is wrong with, why don't Republicans care that a Republican-led Justice Department, a Republican-led FBI, led by men appointed by Donald Trump, is being smeared and the character of the men leading those agencies assassinated by people associated with the Republican Party, not the Democratic Party?
So I obviously can't answer for every Republican. I don't know how they think about this.
What's wrong with that?
I think in every one of these situations, there's a very simple transactional element, which is he is the President of the United States. We want to get some things done.
So
we will have to have
getting
that
a tax bill is more important than finding out if Russia meddled in the 2016 election and making sure they don't. Because as Marco Rubio said,